My name is Ulrik, Lehrskov-Schmidt, and I'm an expert in B2B SaaS pricing and technology pricing in general. So I think there are two things. One is that due to technological changes, we're getting more granular data faster, so we have a closer relationship to the products that we have in field with customers. So that is one thing. And the second change is AI. So AI is, of course, unlocking a lot of capabilities, but it does so with a lot of cost. So that means that the innovation in monetization is being forced because it's no longer sort of free to sell software solutions. So these things really are sort of what is driving a lot of the change. And then it is being weaponized because the data granularity and the speed allows for faster testing and iteration on pricing models. And there is this shift where the market, because of the cost of AI, is just accepting that we need new pricing models, new monetization models in order to cover AI costs. So most customers are accepting the fact that it is no longer free and it is hard to distinguish what has cost structures, what hasn't. So vendors are allowed to innovate more and test more things. And you can see that the companies that do so at an increasing rate. So you'll have market leaders that test new pricing models even a dozen times a year, where the old speed was once every other year. So I think two things comes next. I think one is that a lot of usage-based pricing is going to be replaced by credit systems or credit models, which essentially is a form of usage-based pricing paid upfront. So instead of getting access to a product and then paying in arrears depending on usage, I'm now paying upfront for a certain amount of usage, and I'm then drawn down, and any unused usage then rolls over as credit to the next period. So this has a balancing effect on upfront cash flow and risk between vendor and customer that I think is why a credit-based model is winning a lot. So that's sort of the one thing that I think we're going to see a lot of credit-based systems, and we already are. The second thing that we'll see is that there is going to be a sort of a less, let's say, focus on any single model. And I think that a lot of companies are going to choose between traditional license-based models, usage-based model, and credit-based models, depending on what is right for their particular situation and product. And I think that maturity we'll see a lot of in the next 3 to 5 years, because the market is going to force it. One thing is that in order for you to send an invoice, you usually want it based on something that is relatively more real and has a business context. So if the data is 3 months old, it's not really going to work. You want to be able to bill for the most recent period. So that's sort of let's say the very first level of that problem. The second level of it is that the more data is delayed, the less it tends to be trusted, and the less sort of trust your customer will have in your ability to execute it correctly and fairly. So we just see that the ability to measure data real time, have it ordered, have it traced, and have it delivered to the customer so they have a, let's say, tracking of their own usage, generates a lot of trust in the relationship and makes them allow you to charge them on a usage-based effort. This also usually provides the foundation for you to be able to then forecast that usage and say, you have spent this much in the past 3 months, and we anticipate that you will spend this much in the next 3 months. And finally, there is this control element that if the data is not real time, it's really hard to control. But if I can see that I have a usage spike right now, I can step in and I can do something about it. But if I found out that I had a usage spike 2 days ago, I can't really do anything about it today. I think for many companies, that's going to be a work in progress. And I think one thing that you can do is that you can do your very best to design a pricing model that fits your customer's reality. If your customers are, let's say, hospitals, and you can price per patient or per bed or in some other metric that is known to them, is a known unit economic, is a known sort of unit in the way that they operate the world and see their value creation. So that's a huge first step in just creating trust. The second step, aside from having a good pricing model, is exactly to care a lot about, even from a product perspective, having data that is both measurable and delivered to them, is predictable and has this element of control, so that people feel that they are driving the pricing and not the other way around. I had to sort of, for a while, I was trying to operate this term, sort of finally the term actually sort of came to me. So the idea is that commercial debt is the same as technical debt, just for your commercial relationships. So if you have 100 different enterprise contracts and they're all different configurations of the product, different discounts, different billing, etc., it's very, let's say, heavy operationally to lift that revenue, to renew it, to service those customers, to change pricing, all these things. That's what I call commercial debt. Ways in which you can spot commercial debt is, there are a few ways. One is, what is the percentage of contracts that is closed within your standard contract format? So if you have a standard contract format and only 20% of your customers actually use that, you probably have a lot of commercial debt because the other 80 are in some way bespoke. The second way you can measure this is how much of your commercial team's time and resources is spent renewing contracts. So if you have 100% of sales resources and they're spending 60% of their time just doing renewal renegotiations with existing business, you can say that that is a lot of commercial debt because you're spending a lot of potential acquisition costs just renewing revenue as opposed to getting new business. And the final thing I would say is you can start to measure how hard it is for you to make commercial changes. If you have zero commercial debt and everybody is on the same pricing and the same contract, if you want to make a change prices, change some product configuration, it is essentially one piece of communication that you then send to every one of your customers. But if you have 100 different agreements with 100 different customers, now you need to craft 100 different messages and maybe do 100 different versions of that change to fit every customer. So change just becomes harder and slower if you have a lot of commercial debt. It's not one of these things where commercial debt is something that you can and should avoid. It's more like technical debt is something that should be managed. So you should be aware that it exists. You should be aware of the cost. You should be aware how it is generated in the friction point between product sale, finance, and development as you develop the business, and just know how much of it you incur as you're trying to, let's say, win the market that you're winning. And of course, at some points, like technical debt and everything else, it needs to get cleaned up.